Good evening. It is a joy for me to welcome you to the 4th annual Beacons of History Awards event. I am so glad that you're here. I'm Denise Doring Van Buren. I'm the past president of the Beacon Historical Society, and I'm also chair for tonight's fundraiser. As you can see, I'm coming to you from the historic East End on our beautiful Main Street right here in Beacon. No matter where you are, I hope tonight to transport you not only to Beacon, but also to her historic past. We didn't expect, of course, that we'd be conducting this annual fundraiser virtually, but we did feel it was important to continue this tradition despite the pandemic, especially at a time when Beacon continues to experience a lot of change. We believe that it is so very important to appreciate the history of our community, the history that created our unique sense of community. Beacon is a great place to live because of those who went before us, and tonight we salute them. But let me begin by thanking you for being here and supporting the mission of the Beacon Historical Society. You know, we're making history by this virtual program, so you're a part of it already. One of the dictionary definitions of the word beacon is a fire or a light set up in a high or prominent position as a warning or a signal. As we all well know, of course, our city takes its very name from the beacon signal fires along the Hudson Highlands during the American Revolution. But a secondary definition of the word beacon is a source of inspiration. And so it seemed only fitting that we would name our award Beacons of History, as the family and the organization whom we honor tonight serve as an inspiration to help us preserve and celebrate our city's rich past. In fact, we not only have 2 deserving honorees, but also an interesting keynote address about a little-known chapter in Beacon's history. Many thanks to extend to our sponsors and supporters, some trivia, and when we close our program, we'll remember our history hero, Bob Murphy, who we lost in 2020. But to begin, I have asked our president, Diane Lapis, to give us a short State of the Society. Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane Lapis, president of the Beacon Historical Society. Welcome to our 4th annual Beacons of History Award event. Since 1976, our society has been serving our community by helping to preserve and promote Beacon's history. With your support and thanks to our trustees and volunteers, we are able to serve over 2,500 community members and visitors each year who enjoy our archives, lecture series, events, exhibitions, and educational programs. With deep gratitude to the efforts of Bob Murphy, our former president, city historian, archivist, and writer extraordinaire, our society has grown from a small group of concerned citizens to an active group of volunteers and members, sharing common interests in the history of this beautiful city. Almost 3 years ago, we moved from a one-room office at the Howland Cultural Center to our headquarters at 17 South Avenue. Here, we welcome researchers from around the corner to across the globe to utilize our resources and make connections from the past to the present. We are inspired by guest lecturers who present topics about the history of our city and local area. Some of our past speakers have included noted travel writer Patricia Schultz and Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt scholar Jeffrey Urban. Our monthly newsletter informs and delights all who read stories from our past as it relates to Beacon. Our walking tours, The Ghost and the Mist, Murder and Mayhem, and the Postcard series are entertaining and educational. Volunteers dress in period costumes and transport visitors back in time over 300 years to meet characters from Beacon's past, such as Madam Brett, Alexander Hamilton, and Eliza Howland. The Society collaborates with a host of organizations in our community. This past year, the Bannerman Castle Trust showcased their collections to a big crowd in our galleries. At the Beacon Library, we present rotating mini exhibits that are sure to whet your appetite to learn more about local history. Our cemetery committee cleans monuments and places flags at veterans' graves with help from the American Legion and local Boy Scouts. Thanks to a grant from the Beacon Elks Lodge, we created history learning bags for our youngest historians. Each bag contains a lesson and a meaningful hands-on activity to learn about iconic places and structures in Beacon. As you know, the Society is a repository for all things that relate to the history of Beacon and its antecedent towns of Fishkill Landing and Matawan. Community members like you donate items to our collection in order to preserve our history and help future generations understand their heritage. We are happy to welcome an outstanding item to our collection of a 1917 painting by noted Beacon artist Ella Ferris Pell of the Fishkill Creek looking west from the Matawan Bridge. Our successful and varied programs and ever-growing archives and exhibitions garner a lot of interest throughout our community and beyond. With that in mind, I am excited to share the news that the Historical Society is moving to larger quarters. The former rectory at St. Joachim's Church on Leonard Street will provide additional space for exhibitions, research, meetings, archival storage, and administrative offices. Pending health regulations, we look forward to welcoming you all in the spring. Now, I would like to congratulate our honorees for this year's Beacons of History Award, the Coris Family from the Duchess Manor, and the Alps Sweet Shop. Their dedication to serving our community and celebrating the rich history of Beacon is exemplary. Mayor Lee Kiriakou would also like to extend his congratulations to the awardees. We look forward to seeing you in 2021 at our new home on Leonard Street. Until then, visit us on Facebook and Instagram and our new website at beaconhistorical.org, your gateway to history. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Diane. You're doing a great job as president, and we are all grateful. The Beacon Historical Society was founded in 1976, so it's exciting to realize that our society has been celebrating 4 decades of collecting and preserving Beacon's past. Much of the Society's mission is carried forward by our Board of Trustees. It's too bad we can't all be together to celebrate, but I would like to recognize all of them for what they give to our society and to Beacon. The Beacon Historical Society has spent the last few years at 17 South Avenue, but we have already outgrown that space. Thanks to all the items you donate to celebrate our history. Photos, maps, mementos, signs, documents. We're privileged to serve as stewards of these artifacts, which together tell our fascinating collective story. Your support this evening will help us to afford to move to a new and larger home on Leonard Street, as well as help to update that space and pay the rent. We would like to extend an open invitation to everyone to come visit us at our new location during our public hours once we reopen. Come see our fascinating collection, relive memories of the ferry or the incline, research the history of your family or your home, learn more about Beacon and its fascinating past. If you're not already a member of our society, please also consider joining us. At just $25 a year, you not only help support our efforts, but also receive our great newsletter and access to lectures. Simply go to our website, beaconhistoricalsociety.org, and look beneath the support button to find out just how easy it is to become a member. So thanks to our sponsors, they truly make this night a success. We'll share the names and the ads of all of our supporters at the end of the show, but allow me to recognize our 4 most generous Mount Beacon level sponsors. Antelec and More Insurance. Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Johnson, in memory of Arthur M. and Rita Johnson and Joseph A. and Marie Papo. Karen and Denny Meyer, in memory of Gladys Davis and Lucy Meyer Harrison LeClaire. The Van Buren family, in memory of Bob Murphy. Before our keynote address, let's enjoy a few Beacon history trivia questions, and I'll have the answers a little bit later on in the show. Let's start you off with some easy ones. What year did Beacon become a city? And what were the names of the 2 villages that joined to create the city of Beacon? What was Beacon's last hat shop, and when did it close? Where was Beacon's YMCA located? What was Beacon's first factory? How much did the Mount Beacon Incline Railway cost to construct in 1902? The answers after our keynote address. It's an honor for me to introduce to you Dr. Myra Young Armstead, Bard College Vice President for Academic Inclusive Excellence, Lyford Patterson Edwards and Helen Gray Edwards Professor of Historical Studies, and author of Freedom's Gardener, James F. Brown, Horticulture and the Hudson Valley in Antebellum America, which explores the diaries of a free African American who lived on the grounds of Mount Julian in the 1800s. Dr. Armstead.
Hello. For the next few minutes, I'd like to talk to you about someone I came to call my guy. And that's because I spent nearly 7 years of my life researching his life, trying to figure out who he was. And I did this by consulting mainly a diary that he left. But I'm getting a little ahead of my story. My guy was James Francis Brown, who was born a slave in Maryland in 1793, but who died a free man in Fishkill Landing in New York State in 1868. Fishkill Landing was the former name of Beacon. Now, one of the remarkable things about James F. Brown was that he kept a diary for nearly 40 years. So he was literate. And that diary, when he died, fell into the hands of his wife, Julia. They had no children. So when she died in 1890, she had worked for the Verplanck family along with James. The Verplancks were a socially and politically prominent family in New York State in the 19th century. And they had an estate on the Hudson in Fishkill Landing, which is Mount Julian today. When Julia died, that diary went to the Verplancks. They used the diary because it was so encyclopedic in many ways to construct their own patrilineal genealogy in 1892. And then eventually they gave the diary to the New York Historical Society, where it is today. So the diary is very encyclopedic in much of what it records. You definitely can get a sense of the transformations, the major transformations economically, technologically, politically, that went on in the 19th century through that diary. But for the next few minutes, I just want to talk about 3 ways in which that diary is useful. One is that it charts the nuances of slavery and the slave system and the structure of slavery. Secondly, it helps us to see the range of anti-slavery activity in this country in the 19th century. And then finally, it gives us an idea of the role that free Black men, such as my guy, who were people who were literate, the role that those people had in their communities. So first, let me talk about the nuances of slavery itself. The key thing to remember is that slavery was an economic system. It was a way of ensuring a permanent supply of labor, especially in the 19th century, for plantation economies in the South, whether those economies were about sugar in Louisiana, rice in the Carolinas, tobacco in the Chesapeake, and then especially after 1815 or so, cotton throughout the South. Slavery, the Africanization of slavery, and the generational aspect of that, whereby slavery was perpetuated through the mother, was all about economics. It was about ensuring a good return to the slave owner. So when the slave system was not profitable, it only made sense that the structure of slavery would be made to deliver returns. And we find that that was the case in the cities of the South. Now, there weren't many in the antebellum period, that is the period before the Civil War, but in those cities, owners didn't have much economic use for slaves. The work of slaves had to do more with helping to maintain the household, as domestic laborers, laundresses, as cooks, as cleaners, as valets, that sort of thing. But owners found that they could get a return on their slaves if they hired them out. This was a kind of renting arrangement to businesses that really needed workers. So these might be iron works or foundries, or there were a few tobacco factories, not many in the South, longshoreman operations, that kind of thing, rope making operations. If there was a fairly big furniture operating, a furniture manufactory that needed workers, maybe they could use slaves in some capacity. So with these hiring out arrangements, the slaves would, on a yearly basis, enter into contract with the person who was hiring them. Actually, the contracts were assented to by the master, and the slaves were paid wages. With those wages, there was generally the understanding that a portion of them would go to the master, and then the remainder would go to the slave. Very often that slave would be allowed another privilege of sorts, and that was to live out. He was hired out and he could live out, meaning that he could find his own place to live and enjoy a measure of mobility and freedom, as long as he abided by that contract and showed up for work and turned in his wages or her wages. And then there was a third way in which this wage could be used, and that was towards eventual freedom, so that the slave could sometimes work out his cost, and the master would agree to that. Now, we're talking about a very, very small number of slaves. 90% of the slaves in this country were in the South before the Civil War, and most of them just knew full-on slavery. So we're talking a very, very tiny percentage. But Baltimore, which was the city in which James F. Brown worked and lived with his master for a while, was one of those places that had a lot of hired out slaves that were hired out and living out, or slaves that had worked out term arrangements towards their freedom. And James's life sort of illustrates this, because when his first owner died, William Williams died, he left James to his wife, Susan Williams. Susan then allowed her brother-in-law, Henry Williams, to take James and have him as his servant. Well, Henry promised James that when he died, James would be free. And he was, in fact, sick, apparently, when this promise was made. When he died, Susan Williams, who was his owner, did not honor that contract. And instead, she hired James out to another man named Jeremiah Hoffman. James tried to negotiate with Susan and get her to allow him to come to some agreement about his eventual freedom. When she refused, he ran away. And I want to read just a section of the letter that he wrote to Jeremiah Hoffman, the man to whom he was hired out, about that. He wrote, Sir, I know that you will be astonished and surprised when you become acquainted with the unexpected course that I am now about to take, a step that I never had the most distant idea of taking. But what can a man do who has his hands bound and his feet fettered? He goes on to talk about how he didn't really want to do this, but he could not get Susan to agree to any terms. He said, I could have lived with you all the days of my life if my conditions could have been in any way bettered, which I entreated with my mistress to do, but it was all in vain. Before I was married, I was promised my freedom. And he explains that he thought he was going to be free at Mr. Williams' death, and so he married. And now that he finds that it's in vain to continue to beg Susan for any consideration of his freedom, he decides to run away. So this takes me to the next big issue, which is the range of anti-slavery activity. Well, one way of expressing your objection to slavery, if you were African American, was to run away. And that's what James did. Secondly, James ran away in 1827. That letter that I just read was dated August 1827. And he chose to run away to New York because of a second response by anti-slavery activists, and that was to provide in state legislatures for gradual abolition of slavery. And that's what happened in New York State. New York State passed a law in 1799 saying that if you were born of a slave mother after July 4th, 1799, and we can talk about the irony of all that, that eventually you would be free. And there were a couple of amendments to that law. Ultimately, 1827 was the year in which slavery was done away with. So James takes advantage of this other option, gradual abolition by state. There was the option of private manumission, where an owner could just decide to free his or her slave. And we see that this is an option that James is trying to take advantage of to no avail. But he is able to, once he runs away to New York, through the intervention of the Verplanks, his owner, Susan Williams, finds out where he is and writes to Daniel Verplank and basically says, I just want this to settle the matter. And they kind of agree on an installment plan. And by 1830, James was free. Another option was to engage in full-on abolitionist activity. And we see that this touches James's life when he runs away. He's helped by Quakers. The correspondence that's available in the New York Historical Society and in the Verplank papers indicates that there was Mr. John Needles in Baltimore, who was a known abolitionist who was involved in this. James had spent some time in Delaware, and I speculate that when he ran away with Mr. Needles' help through Delaware. And this is because I found that there was a Quaker family in Delaware, the Newlands, Cyrus Newland, who had property in Dutchess County. His son, Robert Newland, moved to occupy that land, which was in Fishkill. So it seems reasonable that James was sort of spirited along through a kind of underground railroad route to Fishkill, and through the Newlands came into the circle of the Verplanks. James in the diary mentions his familiarity with a man named David Ruggles, who might have been a noted horticulturalist across the river in Newburgh, or it could have been the free Black abolitionist from Connecticut who ran an operation out of New York City called the Committee of Vigilance, which helped runaway slaves find legal representation against slave catchers. Also in the diary, there are cryptic mentions of James receiving a package from Maryland, and that often was a way of talking about the Underground Railroad. Finally, I want to talk about his leadership of the Black community. He was a master gardener. He had no children. He was given a great deal of responsibility on the Verplank estate. He supervised other workers. He was their purchasing agent. So this would have given him a certain amount of status in his community. He was well connected with the leadership of New York's African Methodist Episcopal Zion denomination, which was the second denomination, Black denomination to form right here in New York State, formally in 1821, but really around 1800. He and his wife host and sort of are like an aunt and an uncle for one of the grandchildren of this leadership. He brokers property purchases for free Blacks in the period that otherwise is known as the era of the common man, the Jacksonian era, when property qualifications are lifted for white males, they are imposed for Black males. So that in New York State, there's a $250 property qualification for Blacks to be able to vote. James becomes a property owner, and he helps other Blacks in New York to buy land through the good offices of John DeWint, who was a neighbor of the Verplanks to the south. This is somebody who had real estate in the area, and James helps his friends to buy property in Fishkill Landing, and this enables them to vote. Finally, I'll just mention that he helped the Black community to build their own burial ground in 1851 with the help of John P. DeWint again. He is at the head of a group called the Colored People's Union Burial Ground, and they purchase land for the Black community to bury their loved ones. I'll conclude with those few highlights and just reiterate that his life is a wonderful measure and index and entree into social hierarchies and social cultural rhythms and mores of the 19th century.
Thank you, Dr. Armstead, on behalf of our Historical Society, for your remarks and for your research into this important topic. We are grateful. So how did you do with your trivia? What year did Beacon become a city, and what were the names of the two villages that joined to create it? 1913, Fishkill Landing, and Mattiwan. What was Beacon's last hat shop, and when did it close? Durrell, which ended Beacon's 150-year history of making hats when it closed its doors in 2005. Where was Beacon's YMCA located? The Y operated in the late 1890s at 466 to 470 Main Street, across from the Helen Center. Its parlor, library, game room, and gymnasium once attracted as many as 400 patrons a week. What was Beacon's first factory? The the Matawan Company, founded in 1840 by Philip Hone and Peter Skank. Its structure was eventually incorporated into the building today that's located at 1 East Main Street. And how much did the Mount Beacon Incline Railway cost to construct in 1902? $165,000. That's equivalent to about $5 million today. Hope you enjoyed playing some trivia. We'll have another 5 questions later in the program. And now it's time to present this evening's awards. Our first honoree is our organizational recipient, the Alps Sweet Shop, which has been family-owned and operated on Main Street in Beacon for 3 generations and nearly a century. Founded in 1922 by chocolatier Peter Charkalis, it is today operated by Sally Charkalis Kraft and her husband Terry Kraft, a master chocolatier who continued the tradition of her father and her grandfather by making chocolate following time-honored recipes in small batches and using fresh, natural ingredients to make the finest confections in the Hudson Valley. The Alps is believed to be the longest continuously operating business in Beacon and is a generous supporter of several local causes. The holiday of no true Beaconite is complete without a basket or a box of chocolates from our sweetest local business, the Alps Sweet Shop.
My mother and I would like to thank the Beacon Historical Society for this recognition. We are proud to be able to say we have been in Beacon for almost 99 years. For me, it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to carry on the tradition of the Alps from my parents and grandparents. I would not have been able to do this without my husband Terry, whose master chocolatier skills and knowledge have taken the Alps to a new level.
This is Eleanor Roosevelt, and this is my grandfather.
Beacon has seen many changes over the years. It's always heartwarming when people reminisce about coming to the Alps after church and other functions. I am honored to have been part of so many families' traditions over the years. We are grateful to the continued support of our Beacon community.
And we'd like to thank also the Beacon Historical Society for keeping the history alive. Thank you.
Congratulations to Sally and to Terry, the Charkalis family, the Alps Sweet Shop family, as the recipients of the 2020 Beacon of History Award in recognition as the longest operating business on Main Street and in gratitude for a multi-generational commitment to our community. And now for our 2020 Beacon of History Award individual family recognition, the Coris family, which has just sold its landmark Duchess Manor catering facility after nearly 75 years in business. The former Timony Mansion was purchased in 1944 by George Angel as a gift for his son, Michael Coris, who transformed the property into a hotel, dining room, and a tavern. Officially opened in 1948, Duchess Manor flourished at the ideal location overlooking the beautiful Hudson River and hosted generations of Beaconites for all of our important family events. Through the decades and its own generations, the Coris family has been a generous supporter of so many local nonprofit organizations, but in particular, the Beacon Volunteer Ambulance Corps, for which it hosted an annual benefit brunch for many years.
Hello and welcome to the 4th Annual Beacons of History Award Ceremony. I am Dean Coris, and on behalf of my family, my brother Harry Coris with his family, and my sister Georgia Whitson and her family, we would like to thank the Historical Society for this prestigious award. When our parents, Michael and Helen Coris, began the Duchess Manor in the late 1940s, they wanted to live and raise a family in a place with a great sense of community. Thanks to organizations such as the Historical Society, Beacon is once again the gem of the Mid-Hudson Valley. Although our stewardship of the Duchess Manor has now come to a close, we fully believe that the new owner, the Hudson Islands Fjord Trail Group, will serve the community of Beacon and the surrounding area in a beneficial and very important manner. In closing, we wish the best to the Fjord Trail Group, and again would like to thank the Historical Society for this wonderful award and the recognition of our family's achievements.
So we were fortunate to catch up with Dean earlier, and now I've been able to chase down not only Dean Coris, but his sister, Georgia, and his brother, Harry, in order, on behalf of the Beacon Historical Society, to formally present them with our 4th annual Beacons of History Award in recognition for all that they have done for our community.
Good afternoon, and I thank you from my brother, Harry, my brother, Dean, and myself, Georgia, for this honor that you are bestowing upon us on behalf of our family. And on behalf of my grandparents, George and Anna Angel, and my parents, Michael and Helen Coris, we thank you for the opportunity to express our gratitude and respect for the friendship and support we have shared with this community. It has been our privilege to serve you for the past 75 years, and we have had the pleasure of sharing some of the most memorable events in the lives of so many wonderful people. For instance, first jobs, proms, weddings, anniversaries, special family celebrations, and community events. How fortunate we have been to share in your lives and to make the memories with you. For the Coris family, the decision to retire and to close the historic Duchess Manor have been bittersweet. Unfortunate events such as the coronavirus have made us realize that it is time to stop and smell the roses, as they say. To enjoy old age, start spending more time with our families. We're happy to start this next chapter of our lives as we forever hold memories of Duchess Manor and our community dear to us. We are grateful for the love and support of this community throughout the years, and we wish continued success for Beacon Historic Society, good health and happiness for you all. Thank you.
Georgia, thank you for those wonderful words. We're also grateful to hear about it. And I wanted to point out the award today actually comes from the files of the Beacon Historical Society. We think it's from the late 1950s, and I'm going to ask the Coris siblings here to tell us who's in this picture.
Well, this is Bob and Claire Lou Gould. My mom, Helen and Mike Coris. Dad's partner, Nick McGurry, and his wife, Ann.
How
who
wonderful.
were together for the beginning till the 1960, when Dad ended up taking over the business by himself.
Wow. And you thought that you even knew what the occasion might have been for these outfits.
Closing.
And what was
Closing
that?
party for the end of the season. A costume closing party.
All right. Well, a lot of memories here, a lot of memories for all of us at the Duchess Manor, thanks to the Coris family. So congratulations on your award. We're also very grateful, and we wish each of you the best in your next chapter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denise.
Now, time to test your Beacon knowledge again. Here's our final set of 5 questions. This radio station, known as the Voice of the Clouds, made its debut in April 1928 from its towers high atop Mount Beacon. What were its call letters? Why will you find Chandler's Drum and Bugle Corps in the record books? How many young men from Beacon lost their lives during the Vietnam War? Who was Colonel William Few, and what was his connection to our city? And how is Beacon connected to the Great Seal of the state of New York? Here's the answer to those questions. WOKO, the highest broadcasting station in the East at the time. Number 2, when it was disbanded in 2004, Chandler's was the oldest continuously active drum and bugle corps in the world and the first drum and bugle corps ever to reach 100 years, having been organized in 1903. Number 3, we lost 6 young men in Vietnam. John Bennett, Emilio Rivera, William Phillips, James Pittman, Phil Patrician, and Terrence O'Neill. Number 4, Colonel Few signed the U.S. Constitution on behalf of the state of Georgia and died while visiting his daughter in Fishkill Landing in 1828. His remains were reinterred back to Georgia in the 1970s. And finally, the center of the Great Seal of the state of New York is the sun rising above Mount Beacon, according to Joseph Gavitt's History of New York. We know the answers to these and so many other questions about Beacon's past because of one remarkable individual, Bob Murphy, who served as president of our society and city historian for 2 decades, and who we lost tragically on July 11th after a valiant fight against cancer. Bob had an encyclopedic knowledge of our community's history, a witty sense of humor, and a kindness that made all feel welcome and appreciated. He was a gifted writer, an accomplished photographer, and a faithful friend. Inspired by his father's talents in the darkroom, he captured thousands of images for posterity and created dozens of interesting slideshows in order to share his love of his hometown. Bob was happiest when sharing an anecdote or chapter from our past with anyone who inquired about any topic as long as it related to Beacon. There's no doubt that when Bob Murphy arrived at the gates of heaven, that in addition to his parents, there was a long line waiting to welcome him. Ben Hammond, Phoebe Dowdy, Amy Sargent, Eliza Howland, Charlie Lucy, and hundreds more of the men and women whose stories he had preserved through his decades of research and writing. Like them, we owe a debt of gratitude to this extraordinary man for devoting his adult life to capturing their stories for the benefit of future generations, that is, for being Beacon's memory keeper and storyteller. For 38 years, Bob edited our Historical Society's newsletters, always finding interesting topics and photos to edify and entertain us. At the time of his death, he and I were collaborating on a book of those newsletters, which I'm honored to share will be available in coming weeks. It will include more than 1,000 photographs and total more than 500 pages, making it a great addition to your library. And proceeds will benefit the Historical Society. I look forward to preserving Bob's legacy through its publication in the next few weeks. Before we close our program tonight, just a few announcements. First and most critical, thank you again for supporting us. Our mission's never been more important than it is right now with all the development and interest occurring in Beacon. Thanks for your commitment to saving the story of our city. Second, as you know, tonight is a fundraiser. We're very grateful for your attendance, your enthusiasm, and your support of our 4th annual awards event. If you're not already a member of the Society, please do visit our website to become one. We also eagerly accept financial and historical donations. You've got my email. Please just contact me if you'd like to be a part of what we do. I am so grateful that you were a part of tonight. We made history ourselves by conducting our 4th annual event on a virtual platform. Thank you to Dr. Armstead. Congratulations to our wonderful honorees. Appreciation to our sponsors and gratitude to our members. And finally, I promised Bob Murphy I would take over editing the Historical Society's monthly newsletter beginning in January. I hope you'll share your family photos and stories with me so we can document for future generations the essence of who we are as a people. We'll close with a list of our sponsors and supporters tonight, followed with a few more historic images from that forthcoming book. Thanks for making history with us tonight.